Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to another episode of Extra Extra. It's all about whiskey. I'm your host, Jason Johnston Yellen, aka The White Walker, and I'm joined today, and as always, with the wonderful Joshua Hatton, aka The Whiskey Cherub.
Oh, gosh, oh, Jesus. That may take off, and I like it, and I don't like it at the same time.
Well, you birthed me with The White Walker, and so I felt it was only fair that I birth you with The Whiskey Cherub.
The Whiskey Cherub. I'll take it. You know, I'll take it.
I just like it when people say to me, do you call him that because of his long hair or because of his chubby red cheeks? And I say, why not both?
Why not both? Yeah, it is a little bit from column A and from column B. Continue. Yes, go. You do you.
So in our episodes of Extra Extra, one or the other of us brings a pertinent news story to the attention of the other. We spend the first half of the episode reading through the piece with occasional side comments, and then we spend the second half of the podcast maybe attempting to do a deeper dive into the story that has been put in front of us. And we try to keep it to a tight 30. Sometimes it's a tight 35. And I tried not to be my usual cantankerous self, getting in the way of Joshua during all of our recordings. And so, Joshua, with that in mind, I give you the floor.
Cantankerous is the correct word. You nailed it out the gate. So, the article I selected is from a daily email, sometimes twice a day email I get from Mark Brown, who is the CEO. He's like the guy with Sazerac. And
indeed he is.
Right? And so he puts this newsletter out. He usually comes at around 3 a.m. I don't know why he's not asleep at that time. But anyway, he compiles a list of stories that are pertinent to the whiskey, basically the spirits, wine, and beer industries, the adult drinks industries.
I'm with you.
Right? And a lot of stuff doesn't really apply to us. There's a lot of wine stuff. There's a lot of beer stuff. Occasionally some uninteresting whiskey stuff. But this one really captured my attention, not because the story is a massive story, but because I think that it touches on a larger issue. And I'm really glad to point out that we won't be discussing tariffs. We won't be discussing sexism. We won't be discussing my cherubic appearance or your white walking appearance.
But I was going to say, wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to discuss those things because they no longer existed within the whiskey world?
Jeez Louise, that would be nice. What we will discuss is faking, but not the faking that you're used to. So hear me out. The headline, which, by the way, this article was originally in the Des Moines Register. So this is...
I read it weekly.
Right? You do? So Des Moines, that's in Idaho, right?
No.
It's in Iowa?
Indeed.
All right. So from Des Moines, Iowa, of course. I get my I-states mixed up. Anyway, typical American.
Were you off the day you did geography at school?
I was. So the headline reads, State suspends license of Clear Lake Bar accused of selling cheap liquor from refilled premium brand bottles. The author is Perry Beemanlawa.
Okay.
Perry, if you're listening to this and I've annihilated your name, I do apologize. So the article originally came out on October 25th. And here's how it goes. The state has suspended the liquor license of a Clear Lake bar opened in cooperation with the Surf Ballroom after workers were caught pouring cheap liquor into bottles that had held higher shelf brands. That is considered a health threat and a violation of state regulations, an administrative law judge ruled on Monday. The Surf Ballroom and Museum and MNG Restaurant Corp. Announced plans for the Surf District Rock and Roll Grill in 2016. The bar and restaurant is in a building next to the surf ballroom and contains artifacts from the historic ballroom used in a licensing arrangement. M&G owns and operated the business.
So just to be clear, when you started reading this, I thought this was a capture from during the end times, but this is a case that dates to 2016?
I think that the business originally opened in 2016.
Oh, okay.
And this is like a bar within that sort of general group, right?
Gotcha.
So it goes on. The Iowa Alcoholic Beverage Division said M&G, that's really hard to say, M&G, will have its license suspended for 21 days. The business can appeal within 30 days. That's interesting. So regardless, 21 days, you cannot have your license, but you can appeal 9 days thereafter. The case did not involve surf, ballroom, and museum.
Okay, so just the bar was guilty of doing this.
Just the bar.
Okay.
The Iowa Department of Public Safety filed a complaint against M&G alleging bartenders had reused containers in violation of state regulations. A contested hearing was held on October 7. Specifically, the company was accused of pouring Hawkeye vodka and whiskey into bottles that had held more expensive brands. The business was also accused of mixing Hawkeye whiskey and, quote, apple pucker into a Crown Royal apple bottle. Now that is really interesting. A company representative, Jeremy Malsby, testified that the labels on a Jack Daniel's and Crown Royal apple were worn out because bartenders were required to wipe them at the end of each day rather than from repeated heavy use.
Wink.
Malsby denied the business was refilling premium bottles with cheaper liquor. He added that a funnel the state accused the business of using to transfer the alcohol was used instead to pour sugar for drinks, or beer used to make beer cheese. Administrative Law Judge Thomas Augustine's decision, issued Monday, said the bar had threatened customers' health. Quote, "These are serious violations that impact public health and safety," Augustine wrote in this decision. Putting liquor in used bottles poses all kinds of health risks, especially if the bottles are not completely cleaned and dried. He added, quote, "It's not lost on this judge the economic impact this decision will place on the licensee and its employees. However, the licensee management brought this burden on themselves when they chose to refill bottles of liquor or otherwise not keep alcohol in its original container." And now we're on the last paragraph here.
So just before you get to that final paragraph, so is it clear when this investigation occurred or when they were caught doing this or served with some legal document that says you've been doing this, or have they been doing this from the beginning? Like, I'm not hearing in the article either when they did it or have they been doing it the whole time.
So let's look at the timeline here, okay? So it said that they had their license suspended for 21 days, but that the business can appeal within 30 days. And then when you go to the next paragraph, it says that the contested hearing was held on October 7. So my guess is this started in early September.
So you think it would have been a quick turnaround from, we think you're doing this, let's put this in front of a court of law and see what a judge happens to say about this?
At the very least, it will have been 30 days prior to October 7, right? It may be more, right? But they were only able to appeal 30 days afterward, after they were caught doing this, okay? So let's make an assumption here, because you're correct. It's not incredibly clear, but let's make an assumption that this happened in early September. Okay. So it goes on with a quote. Further, it is more likely than not that the licensee was previously unfairly enriched by selling cheaper well liquor as premium liquor. Patrons should have a right to get the drink they ordered and pay for without any worry that the liquor that they receive is actually a cheap substitute from an unknown used bottle. Further, as stated, it's a major health and safety concern for alcohol not to be kept in its original container or staff otherwise transferring liquor into used bottles. This judge is especially troubled by the fake Crown Royal apple being created by mixing two alcohols together to create the imposter adulterated liquor. Finally, a complaint was filed with the state by a former employee who frequents the business as a customer.
Here we go.
That's it. That's how it ends.
Oh, Lord.
That's how it ends. Isn't that great?
I thought for sure they were going to drop the complaint was made by this person here. No, it was, but oh gosh. Yeah, there are things to talk about here.
There are things to talk, yeah.
Well, the two questions for me become, number one, if you've actually worn off the labels from repeated handling, even though the chap who was quoted said, no, we make them clean them every night, and that has exacerbated the wearing out of the label. Like, given that they have been found guilty of this, if it's the rubbing of a hand that has erased a label, that takes a lot of handling. Now, I've never worked in a bar in my life, but I would imagine you have to handle something for months before you're actually erasing a label.
Unless you're using a damp cloth, like a bar rag or something like that. Like I can totally see that happening.
Well, and then my second portion is, doesn't it say at the end that the former employee complained as a customer of the place? And so have they been serving during lockdown? Right? Look how many friends we've got in the industry who tried to do, to-go cocktails and to-go drinks and, hey, buy some booze and we'll sell you some food at the same time. For some states, that's by law. And so, I even wonder if they've been open during this time. Who have they been serving? There's so many questions coming out of this.
Yeah.
Let us put a pin in our context clue searching, and we'll come back in the second half for a little chat about some of the philosophical issues raised by this article. It's interesting that this is the story we're covering right before Halloween, because this is an issue that really does chill me. It really does raise the hairs on the back of my neck, because anytime any of us place an order in a bar, whether for alcohol or for food, same goes for restaurants, we are placing trust in the person who receives that order
100%.
and the people who oversee those who take those orders. And it is potentially very easy to do this type of, what would it be called? Sleight of hand.
Sleight of hand, I like that, yeah.
Right? And it does worry me. You and I, and this is slightly different from the mixed drinks world, but you and I, go through to Speyside when we were able to travel, would go into, whiskey bars or bars with known whiskey libraries. You read through the menu and you think, oh, there's a pour I've been searching for. Oh, there's another pour I've been searching for. Gosh, these people have got some good pours. I'll spend my money on one of those and one of those and one of those. Mm-hmm. And you always hope that's what you're getting. You place that trust and you spend your money and you get the thing you're asking for.
Yeah.
The fact that people can be nefarious enough to do the old switcheroo really, really gives me a very bad feeling.
Well, the unfortunate thing is, I think it's incredibly easy for a bar to do this or a restaurant to do this if they so choose to do it, especially when it comes to creating cocktails, right? You can hide ingredients in cocktails if you want, and the consumer would be none the wiser. You can bill a cocktail to be this, wonderful $18 cocktail with all these fancy ingredients, but if they're not looking and you want to put in cheaper stuff, you can definitely do that. You're probably still creating a tasty cocktail, but it'll cost less and you're making more. That's one thing. That's one area where I can see this happening with a bit more. I'm not suggesting this happens with regularity. I'm suggesting if there were a place to hide in lesser ingredients, that would be a more obvious place to do it. But then when it comes to straight pours as well, I would argue that most people, even if they think they're very familiar with their favorite drink, may get poured something else and not know that they were poured something else. I'll give you a very good example, a personal one. And so this was 5, 6, 7 years ago. And this was before, selling whiskey was my full-time job, right? This was when I was with my old company. And I was in Chicago, and I was with some customers, and everybody's ordering dinner. And on the whiskey list, there were a few different Glens. And there was a Glenmorangie, a Glengarry, and a Glenkinchie. Now, the Glenmorangie was $12 a pour, and that was just the regular 10-year-old. I forget what the Glengarry was, but the Glenkinchie was like an $8 pour or something like that. And so I said, and I love Glenmorangie. And so I said, give me the Glenmorangie 10, please. And they bring it, and I taste it, and I said, this is not Glenmorangie. And they said, "No, sir, you ordered a Glenmorangie. That's what we poured." And I said, "I know this whiskey inside and out." So long story short, they poured me a Glenkinchie instead of a Glenmorangie. That pour was a good $4 less. Now, that could have been a complete mistake. I'm not suggesting that restaurant was nefarious and tried to make $4 extra off a cheaper pour. What I am suggesting is, whether it's nefarious or no, I mean, I was lucky because I knew that whiskey, but most people would not, and they would say, "Oh, tastes like whiskey, moving on."
Yeah, if you're sitting having a chat with your friends and you're having a catch up, I've done it before where I've taken a little sip and I've thought, that doesn't taste normal, and I've thought, but it does taste like whiskey, and I'm not going to kick up a fuss, and I'm having a good time with my friends here. Yeah, exactly. I'm just going to carry on regardless.
Yep.
Here's a question for you. When I hear this, and you'd mentioned, at the start of the second half here, that it would be easy for restaurants and bars to pull this off. How closely are distributors watching what's going into a bar and being used by a bar? Because I was wondering, if you were the distributor, and good distributors keep a close eye on all of their accounts.
Yes, they do.
If you were the distributor of, say, Crown Royal Apple, and you noticed that it was always on their menu, but you couldn't really remember the last time you sold them a bottle of it, you might start to ask some questions in there as well. My guess is you wouldn't quite imagine they were combining whiskies and apple flavorings to get a rip-off product. But you could, as a distributor keeping a close eye on an account, potentially ask questions. Would that be your experience? Or would that at least be a potential within your experience?
It is a potential, but I think we need to remember there are a lot of large distributors out there. I will not mention any names whatsoever. There are a lot of large distributors out there that go in and they're not making sales, they're taking orders. There's a big difference between making a sale and taking an order. And on top of this, you also have some distributors that might have an allocated item, right? You want to get that, right? It comes out every fall, whatever it is, right? Some special item. But the only way that you can get that is to purchase X number of cases of this well whiskey, this well vodka, this well tequila, whatever it is. So you have to hit a number to get the highly allocated item. Now, I think in some cases that may be illegal, but in a lot of cases, a lot of different states, it's not necessarily so legal, but it happens a lot.
Sure.
And if you're a bar that really wanted these allocated items, but the only way you can get them is to get shitloads of this other stuff that you didn't really want, what do you do with that stuff that you didn't really want? You got to find places to put it. Now, some bars would say, well, you know what? That becomes my well whiskey. That becomes my well rum, my well whatever. And some might, like this, might do something a bit more nefarious. And I think that this practice of making sure an account buys a bunch of cheap stuff to get the fancy stuff, it just only promotes the potential for bad behavior.
Well, I'm sure if you're the boots on the ground running the bar and you feel the squeeze coming from the distributor, you're going to think, well, this is perfectly fine. I'm being squeezed. I'm going to squeeze somebody else, right? I'm going to do it. Clearly, clearly the rules are not in effect here, and so I'm not bound by them. And you could see that kind of rationalizing the get out of jail free card, where this shouldn't be happening to me. Blah, 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 blah. Now I'm going to pass it on. I also wonder.
Can I just say something really?
Yeah, please.
Keep that in mind.
Please. Yeah, please.
I really want our listeners to know that in the almost 10 years that you and I have had Single Cask Nation, and in the almost 6 years that I've been with Impex and traveling around the country, visiting bar to bar to bar, restaurant to restaurant, this practice that we're reading about right now is something you rarely hear about. That it happens, but it's almost it's almost shit. It's almost like an urban legend. You're like, oh wow, did you hear about those guys? They did that, and it becomes the talk of the industry. And they're like, can't believe they did that, and then you don't hear about it for a while, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want our listeners to think that this is just happening everywhere and it's rampant. But I think it's important to discuss.
Very much so, and that's kind of where I was taking my line of questioning here. Is if you're a consumer and you're looking for the cheapest hit that gets you from A to B, it's all too easy to tell yourself a story about how this liquid came to be in the glass that's sitting in front of you and getting you from A to B. And one of the things that I always advocate is get to know your bartender, get to know your bar owner, right? This is why the loss of Fountainhead, the loss of Ward 3, Delilah's putting out an APB on an event, Mike at Travel Bar, right? Our good friend Christopher Grombeck at Barrel Thief in Fremont, right?
Bill Thomas, Jack Rose,
right. Cash in San Jose, like to see really good people who live and die for this industry, who have had incredibly supportive clientele, right? To see them struggling and going to the walls is so painful, because that relationship is very real and very important. You and I, sat in Ward 3, and they had an open bottle of the first Whiskey Jubilee festival bottling, right?
Yes, as recent as the beginning of this year, they still had some. That's a $4,000 bottle just sitting there.
Right? Right? And so if you saw that, and I think when you and I were in, it was maybe $50 for a half ounce. Maybe?
About that, yep.
Something like that. And to put your money there, this is a bottling that is rare as hen's teeth. To put your money there is to say, I know you, bar owner. I know you, bartender. I trust that this open bottle is exactly what you're telling me it is.
Yeah.
And you haven't recycled some other Heaven Hill product in here to get, a general flavor profile and then hit me up for the big bucks. That is a meaningful relationship. And so on one hand, if you do want to chase bottom price cocktails, I hear you. I get you. I know what that, I know what it means. I know what it entails, right? You're opening a door there, but you still should never be taken advantage of by the very person taking your money for it.
Exactly.
It's a very careful dance. And to hear somebody take advantage of it is sickening.
It is. It's sickening. It's troubling. And I wanted to bring this story to us, interestingly enough, like this, you live in Virginia, I live in Connecticut, right? This doesn't affect our local business at all, but it's something that I think does need to be talked about, because it does happen. And yeah, I agree. Get to know your bartender, get to know your bar owner, make sure that you're comfortable with her or with him, and you're supporting the people that you want to support. And I would even add on to that, get to know the drinks that you love too. I mean, granted, bars are great places to discover new things.
Yeah, that's an interesting position.
Right, but sometimes you go to a place and you want that familiar drink. Well, be familiar with it, and you're a bit yes.
No, you can finish your point.
So just be familiar with it, and that this way you won't get duped if you know your drink.
Yeah, knowing your drink, I'd never even really thought about that angle of it. But yeah, I think your Glenmorangie story sheds light on knowing what's going into the glass. While you were just commenting there, I had to reach over to my bookshelf, because there's a book that immediately came to mind when you started telling us about this news piece. The book's entitled "It's a Bad Thing Whiskey, Especially Bad Whiskey" by Edward Burns. And I've had this book on my shelf for years and years, and haven't read it in a long time. I really should delve back into it again, give it another reading. But there's a wonderful chapter in here where he talks about investigators who in the 19th century would go around mostly Glasgow's bars, but sometimes Scotland's bars, and they would hide sample bottles upon their person. And when they were served a measure by a barkeep, they would surreptitiously, with nobody watching, pour it into their sample bottle and put it back into their coat and then take it away for analysis. And they came to find that whiskey was being adulterated with all sorts, including, but not limited to, rat poison. And it's an amazing case study in the beginnings of consumer protection for us in Glasgow, for those of us in Scotland. But it's a wonderful, wonderful book. It's now very very difficult to get your hands on. But if you do find it, I do highly recommend it. First published in 1995. To repeat?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, what is it again?
It's A Bad Thing Whiskey, Especially Bad Whiskey by Edward Burns. And it's really fascinating and shows you a bygone era where nobody was looking out for the consumer. Nobody was protecting the consumer. Nobody was challenging what was going into glasses. And yet some guys took... And it does say within the book, these guys took their lives in their hands. If they'd been caught doing this, they would have been very well and truly beaten to stop the word getting out.
Well, you suggested that book to me probably a good 8 to 10 years ago or so, and I purchased the book. I just have yet to crack the binder or binding on it. So I will do that. So that I appreciate the reminder. We have to get out of here. So do you want to let our people know stuff?
It's almost like you forgot I was the host there.
I did.
You started hosting your way out of here.
I did. I almost hosted us straight out of this joint.
Well, we'll be here as long as I keep us here, young man. Do not start packing up. Do not put anything into your backpack.
Sit back,
Put your butt back in your seat. Put your butt back in your seat. Okay. So, yes, if you, dear listener, would like to send us a story on whiskey that has captured your attention for us to cover in Extra Extra, we'd love to hear from you. For the moment, we're still just using the same email as One Nation Under Whiskey. And so you can get us at questions@onenationunderwhiskey.com. And as always, there is no E in whiskey. With that said, I am Jason Johnston Yellen, your White Walker. He is Joshua Hatton, your Whiskey Cherub. And this has been Extra Extra. We're out of here. Cheers.
Cheers. Oh, shit. Hold on. There we go.